Hi there, I'm Felonious Ferris. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm joined by my co-host, Demigloom.
Hi, I'm Demigloom. My pronouns are she, her. And what are we doing? You forgot to mention what this was.
We're gonna engage in some really
No,
pointless.
no, 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 no. Like more broadly. Like what is this?
Uh, oh, this is the middle school GSA,
Yeah.
and we are going to, in true middle school GSA fashion, engage in completely pointless queer discourse that no one gives a shit about except chronically online under the age of 18 queers.
My favorite.
Yep.
Um yeah. Yeah, but before that, we have comments and a single voicemail. So,
That's so exciting.
yeah. Let's play the voicemail first. This voicemail comes in. I don't know. This is that really person. I don't know who the fuck this really person is and why they keep engaging with this show, but I don't really like them and they're kind of obnoxious.
I love you. I love you, really.
Felonious Ferris. Come on. Come on, Felonious Ferris. No self-respecting human being watches One Piece. It's just, you don't do it, man. You gotta read One Piece. One Piece is something you read. The anime is very poorly paced and bad. Come on, Felonious. Come on. Great show. Listen to every episode. It's good. Demigloom, Felonious Ferris, you're doing a good job. You're keeping a tight ship. I'm waiting for my guest invitation. Anytime now, guys.
Yeah. You're not getting a guest invitation because we don't do guests on this show. Never. There'll never be guests ever. It'll never happen.
And One Piece, the One Piece anime is great. The animation quality wasn't, and the animation direction wasn't awesome for a while, but then the quality went up, and I probably will eventually also read the One Piece manga, but I love the One Piece anime. I
Life
feel like
is too
it's one of
fucking
those
short
things.
for that.
I feel like it's one of those things that was meant to be animated, and it's so good. I love it so much.
When I said life is too short for One Piece, I literally mean that one cannot read that in their lifetime. It's not possible. It's not possible to get bitches and read all of One Piece. You got to pick one or the other. So, just putting it out there. Riley, you're not coming on the show. We're going to invite Squeebo on this show and not you, just to piss you off. And that's how it goes. Comments. I'm surprised we didn't get any hate comments because it's literally a clickbaity anime is problematic title. Zane commented 3 things. My favorite part was when Demigloom likes mayonnaise. I love middle school GSA, and strawberry milk is goated. It's true. Somebody named Z, I believe. It's spelled XI, all lowercase. They said middle school GSA. Yes, sir. True. Pure Insanity says, please pay me, Demigloom. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't owe you any money. I've never once recruited you for any services, and I don't know who you are. Please leave me alone. And David Fern says, oh my god, my comment was read by a channel with 16 subscribers. I'm famous now. Hey, 17 subscribers now. Get it right.
Really? Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
Also, Riley and Friends says, take a shot every time you hear a mic knock in this episode. You will die. It's true. Your mic is terrible. You are having a boxing match with whatever surface is your microphone is on. And yeah, that's it.
I get nervous. Well, not even I get nervous. I just constantly bounce my legs, even when I'm lying down. I got that super mega ADHD, that double leg bounce ADHD.
You got that AADDHHDD?
Yes.
All right. People complained. By people, I mean one random person that Squeebo showed this podcast to on Discord. They complained that we do too much talking about the last episode and comments and voicemails and Patreon and yada 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 in the beginning of the episode, and we should save it for the last. And to that I say, fuck you. We're gonna do it this way. However, if you don't care, we will timestamp the starting the last episode, everything's like time stamped, at least broadly. So if you don't really care about what we have to say at the beginning, then first of all, you're lame. Second of all, the timestamp exists, so you could just skip to the main topic. So if you're watching this on YouTube right now, just look at the description, and the main conversation will be timestamped. But I'll also, you're not a real LGBTQ plus community ally if you skip the timestamps. To be a real ally, you have to listen to the beginning.
So true.
That being said, Felonious Ferris is feeling incredibly guilty for not touching on certain issues and topics during the last episode, so I'm going to allow them 5 minutes of uninterrupted time to just vent their frustrations regarding anime that they didn't talk about last time, and yeah, that should hold us off, and by that I mean hold them off until we need to talk about anime again. So your 5 minutes starts right now. Go.
Okay, so the big one that we didn't get to was racism in anime. Really, that's a really big one. In probably 70, almost 75% of the anime I see, black characters have the like all the way around lips and are just there's very few black characters that have good designs and also good writing, and that's incredibly frustrating. It's not like black people don't exist in Japan. They do. They just aren't being listened to. We know that this is offensive. We have known that this is offensive. Just it's frustrating. And more on the subject of racism, there's a lot of racist archetypes that you'll see used, and it's the kind of thing where maybe you won't always notice it until it's pointed out. But and it's also odd because racism in Japan looks different than it does in America. Like there's a lot of racism against Chinese people in Japan, and there's racism against South Pacific Islanders, and there's a lot of archetypal things going on that end up being super, super offensive. One of the big examples is Hajime no Ippo, which is a popular boxing anime. And like every once in a while there is a Filipino side character, and every single time it is the exact same racist archetype. It's like morally corrupt, morally bankrupt, dishonest, drunk. I don't have a list. I don't have notes right in front of me, and I'm just doing this off the top of my head. But it's really really problematic, and especially when you look at the broader nationalistic themes in Hajime no Ippo, it becomes really obvious that, oh, this isn't like an innocent thing that he's doing on accident. This is like an actual racist man. And then no one talks about it. And even One Piece, which is obviously one of my favorite shows at the moment. And this is something that whenever I say it, people always blow up about it. But Usopp, really, he's a beloved character, but he is absolutely an Uncle Tom type racist archetype, where he's black, but he's framed as kind of hyper non-threatening. He's emasculated, and pretty much all of the other characters outshine him at all times. This has gotten better over the course of the show. Literally, his name has the word lie in it, Uso. And he's framed as a liar and a coward, and he's kind of purely comedic relief. And it really fucking sucks. It makes me really unhappy. I do still love Usopp as just, when you're watching the show, I think it's really difficult to dislike Usopp. And I think part of that is because of his hyper non-threatening nature. He's just like a silly guy. But I think that while enjoying One Piece, it is also really important that especially if I'm going to be coming on this podcast and talking about how much I love One Piece.
Time's up. Guess what you've accomplished in 5 minutes.
Guess what you've accomplished
in 5 minutes. Guess what?
Let me finish up.
I'm less enthusiastic about One Piece now. Congratulations. That's it.
Yeah.
5 minutes is up. You'll finish another time. Okay, whatever.
No!
Go on.
Usopp, his character gets better. And I think I actually forgot to mention, he also has the all-around lips, which just fucking, it pisses me off so much. Yeah, beloved character, just really, at the beginning of the show especially, really, really problematic. And still problematic. Still needs to be fixed. But, yeah.
Yeah, I also agree that racism is not a great thing that our society has created. It's pretty bad, and usually when I watch TV shows, I don't like to see racism presented in a positive light, or I don't like the content itself to be from a racist point of view. Just my personal preference, I just generally think it's not a great thing.
I wasn't given enough time to go fully into depth about Usopp's character.
Yeah, you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to go fully into depth.
Very nuanced. There's so much nuance, and there's so much to say and think about when it comes to racial archetypes in media, and yeah. Anyway,
so
let's talk about something completely meaningless.
Can you apologize right now to the Black community for liking One Piece? I mean, it's literally Black History Month. Like, come on now.
I'm sorry?
Sorry to who and for what?
Demigloom, shut the fuck
up. Yeah, what are we talking about today? Trenders.
Yeah, trenders.
This might be a debate because I really don't actually believe in trenders. At least, I think you believe in trenders more than I do.
I do. I definitely believe in trenders.
Uh-oh. Let's, well, we just lost all of our fans. So, yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Now that all of our fans are gone, but every last person...
Listen to my explanation, though, okay?
All right. Right now. Why do you believe in trenders? Or what are trenders, and why do you think they exist? What trenders have you seen? What trending activity have you seen?
So, as you may have noticed, in the past 20 years, a lot more LGBT people have been coming out, and our community has grown enormously. And that, in and of itself, doesn't prove the existence of trenders, but some people think it does, and thinks that surely all of these new LGBT people are coming out because straight people and cis people are making up being queer so that they can feel different.
Well,
and to
they
be clear,
can't all be gay. I don't believe all you guys are really gay.
Yeah.
That's the talking point.
And to be clear, I don't sympathize with those people either. I think that that's it's a toxic mindset, and I think it is genuinely, it's untrue, because the reason our community has expanded so much in the past 10, 20 years, even the past 5 years, is because more and more people are feeling safe with accepting their queerness and feeling safe with coming out. 50 years ago, what you did when you were queer was you got married to someone of the opposite sex and hated your life forever, and then died full of regrets. And our society is changing, and now we don't have to do that, and that's great.
We have to do that less so. Less people have to do that. Less people are subject to circumstances where they're forced to do that.
Thank you for correcting me.
Remember, there's the KKK still exists, and those people have children.
Yeah. And my reasoning where I believe in trenders, something that needs to be explained first, is that that I don't think that attempting to call people out for being trenders and having witch hunts where we try and weed out trenders and figure out who's a trender and then exile them from the community. I think all that shit is so fucking stupid because most of this stuff you're never going to be able to prove.
Yes.
And what you're going to end up doing is you're going to end up falsely accusing people who are actually queer and alienating them. And that is unacceptable. If we hold trender witch hunts, it doesn't matter if we weed out 99% trenders. If 1% of the time we end up ostracizing someone who's actually queer, that's just unacceptable.
Yeah,
cannot be allowed.
There is no algorithm you can create for weeding out trenders that will not exclude and alienate people who are not trenders, who will alienate genuine queer people. And you know what I have to say about trenders? This is my hot take: is I don't think trenders know that they're. I don't think trenders know that they're trenders. So there's like that's for me. That's the biggest reason why it's impossible. It's completely impossible to weed them out like that.
I also think that there isn't really enough benefit to exiling trenders. Like, there's, you kicked someone, you told someone that they're not actually queer. Wow, what a positive impact you've made. How awesome is that? How great. It's pointless, and I hate it. And I think I should also clarify that I'm not true scum, which, if you don't know, are people who go on and on talking about like trans people who are trenders and saying stuff like, oh, you need to medically transition in order to be trans, or you need to do this and this and this in order to prove that you're trans.
Yeah, like creating
or,
like I said, creating an algorithm for what is a real trans person, which is usually has to do with desire, like the ability or desire to medically transition or physically. Yeah. It's usually almost always a physical thing, and I think the majority of people who are accused of being trenders are those who do not pass, or those who don't make an effort to pass as a cis person.
Yeah. And I think that I've actually been targeted by those kind of people.
Me too.
Because in general, they don't really like non-binary people.
True scum?
True scum, yeah.
Yeah, because like the existence of non-binary people and their dedication, like completely, basically, like it basically just completely like disproves their entire like theory on how gender works. Like the existence of non-binary people would completely shatter any amount of, if they were to embrace non-binary people, it would completely shatter any standard that they have for other trans people. So they can't.
Yeah. Yep. But all of that being said, I do believe that trenders exist. And I've had experiences in the past where I was like, you know what? I'm pretty sure that person is just saying that they're queer. Of course, this is all internal. I would never attempt to, like, go up to someone and be like, you're a trender! Or tell all my friends they're a trender and get all my friends to stop hanging out with them. That's dumb.
I think the one circumstance that justifies that is if you have evidence that they've if they've proven somehow, like beyond a reasonable doubt, that they have some sort of desire, like if they've expressed a desire to lie about being trans, which is almost never the case.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the majority of trenders are probably, God, I feel so bad even saying these things out loud, because so many of the people who think these things are so dumb. But I am one of those people where I think that some people say that they're bi when they aren't actually. And I think it's an individuality complex thing. I think that people kind of crave being marginalized every once in a while.
God, they're doing it. Oh, God.
I mean, you'll see this shit. You see this shit in other contexts too, because you'll see like trust fund babies who go around and hop trains and act like they don't have a safety net when they do. All these crust punks who performatively act like they're poor when they really aren't. And
that's like all punks. That's the entirety of punk culture.
It's not all of them, but
it's the majority of people who identify as punk, which by your standard wouldn't be real punks or whatever the fuck you snotty little bitches want to
Stop
gatekeep.
Putting words in my mouth.
we've had a lot of arguments about punk, what is and isn't punk, but like so many, like I'd say like a large fraction of people who identify as punk are like people who just so desperately want to be victimized, so desperately wish to be some form of minority. And it's interesting to think, like, because like to me, like if somebody is like unhappy or like upset, you know what I mean, like to me, like that in itself is a valid feeling. I don't really care. Like I don't care if you're a fucking billionaire. If you are legitimately experiencing unhappiness or dissatisfaction with your life, like that's a valid thing to acknowledge, but it's not appropriate to appropriate other suffering to try and justify that. And I think that's honestly a product of society hyperfixating on certain like social categorization and essentially only validating suffering that comes from those places.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, and I think that it's also we're kind of trained by the media we consume, where you look at books and movies, and so many of these main characters are coming from a place of trauma, of marginalization. And I think that kind of ends up making us feel like, oh, I can't be this cool hero, I can't be special if I'm not marginalized or victimized in some way.
Yeah.
Which I think is not true, but I think that a lot of us end up feeling it anyway.
Well, and it's a thing people also seek to justify their feelings because and no matter what, if you have an extreme emotional reaction, you're going to try to like blame it on something. Like incels, like incels are clearly people who suffer from a variety of like mental health issues, but they refuse to actually address that and say, no, bro, it's just because I can't get laid. It's because my fucking my jaw is too weak and I'm naturally selected to die alone.
Yep.
It's like that kind of thinking, you know?
Yeah. And my logic with believing in trenders is less about people who I've met who I believe to be trenders, but more, I mean, I'm sure that we're all aware of this phenomenon on the internet where people will claim to have mental disorders that they clearly don't have.
Oh, wow, really?
Dissociative identity disorder.
Wait. You mean
dissociative identity disorder is the big one.
Do you mean to tell me that people go on the internet and say that they have disorders that they don't actually know for sure that they have? Are you telling me that that happens?
That's exactly what I'm saying, Demigloom. That's exactly what I'm saying.
That's just insane. I definitely don't have like 200 classmates that do that on a regular basis.
And my logic is, if these people are willing to fake having Tourette's, fake having dissociative identity disorder, just so that they can feel special, so that they can get some attention, then why the fuck wouldn't they claim to be queer? Because that's something that's unverifiable, at least ethically.
It's something that's unverifiable, and it's something that will immediately be met in certain spaces with open arms and acceptance and sympathy. A lot of things that people want are given to you when you do something like come out as queer in particular spaces. I'm not here to pretend like, oh, society has gotten super woke. Now anyone who comes out as trans is like they're fucking billionaires now. Like it's obviously, I think the majority of society still isn't very trans accepting, but there does exist an incentive within certain spaces to sort of assimilate and fit in the best you can to, and it's just you'll find your place. People have a hard time finding a place
Yes.
socially, and oftentimes, I think a lot of people are drawn to the LGBTQ plus community on the internet because it's sort of become something much more than what it was initially defined as. Like, it's like there's a lot of aesthetics, interests, and like just things that bring these people together outside of being queer. And I think it becomes attractive to people who are not queer while simultaneously being a pretty much exclusively queer sort of space, which I think creates a sort of identity crisis for those who are drawn to it for reasons outside of it being a queer space.
Yeah. And I think that we as human beings crave tribalism. We crave being a part of a group and being a part of a clique. And I think there's a lot of upsides to the diversity that we have in America, but I do think that we've become, in a lot of ways, this kind of homogenous culture where I think a lot of us end up feeling a little bit lost. Like, so many people whose families immigrated here from other countries 100 years ago end up, I think that those families end up losing touch with their culture and their traditions, and then we end up having this kind of giant gelatinous blob of white culture, which is really nothing in America, and we end up feeling like, where are my people?
You're a white person. Did you have to in like elementary school or middle school like do like an assignment about quote unquote your culture and feel incredibly left out or just like clueless as to what to do? Was this ever a thing you've experienced?
No, not really. I think that my schools were too woke for that.
Well, my schools were performatively woke, so there was all about like, oh yeah, everybody share their culture, and I was like, what the fuck is my culture? I don't remember. I think I mentioned mac and cheese on my fucking assignment, bro. I have no I don't have culture like that. Like, at least at that point in my life. Like, my family doesn't have there's just nothing like inherently cultural about my life. I'm just a person who lives in America. And you could say American culture, right? Which is like, but I think the whole point of the assignment was to discuss things that make you personally unique, or at least divergent from the rest of the people here. They're like, oh, everybody has a unique background, but it's like, no, there's nothing about me that sets me apart from anybody else in this room. Whereas with a lot of people in this room, that is the case, and it was incredibly frustrating. This sounds like a fucking white person trying to pretend that they're marginalized, and I'm not at all. I'm just saying that like, and I'm not even like saying that this was like emotionally devastating or a sign of the death of whiteness in America. It's just genuinely like white people are put in situations where they're completely fucking clueless and are losing touch with this idea of culture when everyone else around us seems to have this thing that we don't.
Yeah, it's and I think we gotta be careful, because otherwise it sounds like we're victimizing ourselves. But it's just a thing that kind of sucks a little bit, and yeah, and I think we crave tribalism, and I think that falsely claiming to have a mental disorder, or falsely claiming to be queer, something like that can't be easily verified, is one way of getting into that tribe, getting into that culture. And also a way of feeling individuality, of feeling like you're special. And the motivation is there, and that's why I think, without a doubt, that trenders exist, and that it's probably even a large amount of people are trenders.
See, that's where I think we disagree. Is I don't think the incentive is great enough to be like specifically to be trans, that a lot of people, that there's like a significant portion of the trans community that is either amplifying a sense of gender dysphoria or pretending or like exaggerating their desire to be of another sex in order to fit in with the community. I just don't see it, and I quite frankly don't care, because I think that the majority of people who are trenders aren't really even, I don't think they're even met with what they're looking for. If I'm going to be completely honest with you, I think they're looking for that tribe. They're looking for that sort of thing. And I think we live in a world where, at least on the internet and in queer spaces, like, being queer doesn't really like inherently give you that community, because like we're already so diverse. Like, so many people are queer, so many people are out as queer, and there's already so much diversity and discourse and just like shit going on within this community that it's so broad that I don't think there's enough of an incentive to be a part of it, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that that TransTRENDERS or Too Cutes are much, much rarer, because that's just, I think that, and I think it's also really important to acknowledge that the people who are TransTRENDERS or are Too Cutes are ill. They're seriously ill, that they're craving this tribe, this culture, and craving marginalization to the point where they'd decide to come out as trans. I think that they need help.
Yeah.
Not,
I think people
be...
like that need help. But what I'm saying is I just don't see this personally within the trans community, and I don't think it's like a major problem that we're dealing with right now.
Yeah. I don't think it's a major problem at all.
I think it's such a small amount of people that are basically exist only to be the only real trenders that I truly believe like are causing problems right now are people like that fucking who's that guy? And yes, I could say guy because they identify as a guy now. That fucking person who was like, they said they were transracial and they got a bunch of surgeries to look like that one K-pop guy.
Yeah.
And then like 2 months later, maybe it was like 2 years later, like a year and a half later, they come out as a detransitioner. And like, this is a huge thing, is a bunch of people are coming out as detransitioners and saying that they were like pressured into joining the LGBT community. Those are the only real trenders that I see. And honestly, to bring up those is the only reason I even felt like talking about this. But I feel like those are, when people use the word trender, they're not even describing that. When people use the word trender, they're talking about people who either are trans and don't have dysphoria, or people who are trans and don't meet their whatever standard of transness that they have. And I'm of the, I guess it's majority now. I think for a long time, people thought that you needed dysphoria to be trans, but I think more people are coming around to the idea that no, like if you could literally wake up and just say, I want to be, I wish, you know what I mean? I wish to pursue a gender transition, whether that's social, medical, whatever, and just do it, and nobody cares. I think one of the biggest things that people are pointing to point to the existence of trenders as they define them is the fucking explosion of gender nonconformity in the AFAB population. You see a disproportionate amount of AFABs identifying as non-binary, gender nonconforming, or trans. And to me, it's just a product. To me, I just see it as a product of people deciding to not participate in a system that exists to oppress them. Because let's be honest, we live in a fucking patriarchy where being a woman comes with a lot of baggage. And I think when you live in a world where something comes with a lot of baggage, like we say, people are naturally going to wish to steer away from that. And I think it's completely reasonable for people who are AFAB to say, hi, I don't want this arbitrary part of who I am to define me. And this idea you have of gender is not something I wish to participate in. And I think it's completely valid. And I don't think you need to have some sort of like intrinsic like fucking gene or like weird like this. There's this weird idea that like real, quote unquote, real trans people are just like born trans, or like from the day they were born they just hated everything about their anatomy or whatever. Where in reality,
the female brain, male brain idea.
Yeah, which I mean, there's that. I think a great Twitch streamer, Vosh, put this the best way. That idea is, there's some validity to that idea, but it's not as if gender is even a brain thing, because it's a social thing. It's not like an inherent part of your brain.
Yeah,
I think what Vosh said, and I bringing up Vosh is like the career suicide, but Vosh said we should just call that like brain sex or something. And that actually really resonated with me. I'm like, yeah, because that is a concept that's closer to sex than it is gender. like the inherent brain characteristics of feminine or masculine individuals.
See, it
Like
is worth saying though that there were studies where it was like, oh, the specific part of this trans man's brain physically resembles a cis man's brain.
Yeah.
And there is some evidence for that, but it is God, I haven't read about it recently enough. So everyone go read about this yourselves. But I think it was partially debunked. I think part of it was people realized, oh, gender's a social thing. And pushing this narrative so hard is just going to undermine the idea that gender is a social thing.
I think progressives spent like 3 years, like from like 2014 through like 2000 to like mid like 2017. I think progressives spent like that entire time just looking for anything they could to like validate trans people, because it was just it was just like each side of the political each side of every side of the political spectrum was sending their fucking just rapid firing like study after study. You know what I mean? It was like we were like in such a rush to prove a lot of things that we sort of I think that has had negative consequences on our understanding of transness, because oftentimes the only way we could prove the validity of certain trans people to conservatives was this idea, these like rare scenarios where like, oh look, this trans woman actually has a female, her brain is more like a cis female than it is a cis man, or like all these things, or like for example, like the validity of gender dysphoria and just like playing the victim and that sort of thing. Like I think we used a lot of like shitty tactics to prove something that we and when I say we, I mean liberals who I don't identify with, pushing a narrative without actually knowing what the fuck we were talking about. Because because once it became the progressive thing to, and I truly do believe that Democrats, they say that the Democrats needed something to fight for, and once gay marriage became legal, like they, you know what I mean, they were looking for that like next human rights thing, and they came to trans people. I truly do believe that from the perspective of the Democrats, it was very convenient for them to just start pushing trans rights shit. I'm fucking eternally grateful for the amount of trans acceptance we've seen in the past like half decade, but I can also acknowledge that a lot of it came from a place of performativity, and it came from people who didn't actually care. What I was trying to say was we were, rapidly trying to push this like social movement, and within the rapid push for trans rights and trans acceptance, we sort of started trying to use language that would resonate with certain people, and by doing that, we created a lot of ideas of like what it means to be trans that don't exactly hold up today. That was my point.
Yeah.
And I guess my argument... Go on.
No, you go ahead.
My argument is that like the majority of people that those who believe in trenders would describe as trenders are just trans people who we have yet to like socially justify in a way. Like I think particularly non-binary people and she theys, you know what I mean? Like AFAB she theys, who are like seen as like not going all the way, or trans people who aren't entirely concerned with passing or don't have a desire to medically transition. I think a lot of these people weren't accounted for when we developed all of our trans acceptance talking points, and therefore there's just a certain amount of disdain for them. You get a lot of people who are like, well, I was all about supporting trans people until these people showed up, or you know what I mean, that sort of talking point. And I think that's generally just a product of poor work on behalf of progressives in their attempts to rapidly gain public support for trans acceptance.
Yeah. And I think that thinking about the existence of trenders too hard you shouldn't. I mean, we're having this discussion, but I really don't I don't care about trenders. I don't think that they're doing really harm in a way that makes me feel like I need to address them. Like whatever. They'll figure themselves out.
Okay. I don't mean to call you out, but you did specifically, when we first pitched this podcast, you said that this was particularly something you wanted to talk about. Has that changed? Was there a time where where you cared more about this issue than you do now?
I think that was just, we were throwing out ideas, and I was like, queer topics, queer topics, and
Yeah.
trenders, especially because I lived through a period of kind of social upheaval in the LGBT community where, for a long time, being true scum or being anti-trender and wanting to call out trenders was like the norm.
Yeah.
And taking a really firm stance on this was the norm. And that's, I think, slowly phasing out. Yeah, I don't think I ever really gave too many shits. I've never talked about it, or not talked about it, but thought about it. Like, it doesn't consume my thoughts. I probably remember trenders exist only when someone mentions it, for the most part.
Yeah. So we've done a little bit of back and forth about like, okay, this is why I believe in trenders. This is why trenders exist. Like we kind of like went back and forth as far as the actual talking points. Do you want to just say like, generally speaking, like what do you have to say like to summarize everything? Like what does Felonious Ferris think about and have to say about trenders? Just to like summarize it all.
I think that they're real. I think that these are people that exist, but I don't really give a shit. Yeah, I don't think it's something that's really worth anyone's time or energy thinking about, except when it comes to those insane detransitioners who go on Fox News and say, "Oh, I'm a victim. I'm a victim because people made me think I was trans and then I wasn't." Oh. I think we need to be calling those people out and being like the transracial person. We need to be, letting people know, oh, we never accepted that person in our community.
Yeah.
That was just, they were just completely on their own shit.
I don't think anybody in our community is telling people to transition their ethnicity.
I think all of us think that that's really problematic, actually, and think that it only undermines trans issues.
And I guess the thing with me is I don't even believe there's social utility in using the word trender, if I'm being totally honest. I think it's an outdated buzzword that was used and weaponized only by bad-faithed and transphobic people for the most part. Either that or true scum people. And the people, those detransitioners, I would call those detransitioning grifters, people who are part of what we know as the detransitioner grift. It's I wouldn't use the word trender to describe them. I think it's an entirely different concept, and I think the concept of trenders this is where I disagree with you, is I believe that the definition of trender that has been created, I believe that people that meet that standard could hypothetically exist and probably do exist somewhere on God's green earth, but I do not acknowledge any social utility in the usage of that word, and I would almost, I wouldn't call it a slur, but I would, in a similar fashion, condemn usage of that word to describe trans people, like in any context. I don't believe in trenders in that way. I don't believe that there's an important, like a notable amount of people who are pretending to be trans or who are not real trans or whatever that are in our community, infiltrating our community, or just I just don't believe that they're a real like demographic that exists.
Yeah. I mean, there was a time where at the school that we went to together where there were like 40 trans masks and one trans femme, and I think it's important to say that I think that the reason that more people don't come out as trans femme is because there's just around male culture and the way that young AMABs are socialized, there's a lot of shame that comes around femininity or not being masculine enough. and then a lot more bigotry towards trans femmes because
Oh, I know. Trust me.
and this is something it's not too hard to figure out. I mean,
Well, it's because
I think
society. It's because society values masculinity more than it does femininity. So they're naturally those who they believe are intended to exhibit masculinity are met with a stronger obligation to exhibit said masculinity. Whereas femininity is throughout history has always been seen as disposable. You've seen historically people just fucking killing babies that are female and just completely. You see how
not even historically. That's
well,
still
yeah.
happening in parts of the world.
Yeah, but like I'm saying, like historically, as in it's
Yeah.
always been a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The people valuing masculinity more than they value femininity, and just look at how even today, like in modern America, like how men wish for their sons to be versus how they wish for their daughters to be, men and women, but particularly men.
And I think also worth noting is that AFABs, women aren't taken seriously enough to be considered a threat.
Yes.
But when an AMAB transitions and starts using women's restrooms, they are like immediately perceived as a threat. Masculine AMABs and masculine people are just immediately taken more seriously.
Yeah.
And that makes them more scary to people who are ignorant.
Because their actions, the actions of an AMAB have a perceived greater consequence, whether it's positive or negative. So there's that desire for them to be positive and masculine figures, and also that fear of them, you know what I mean, diverging from that path. You don't hear shit about fucking trans men in men's sports, and you don't hear shit about trans men raping men in the bathrooms, the men's bathrooms. You know what I mean? And there's a reason for that. Part of it, one of the reasons that AMABs are bigger, and then the other reason is the internalized misogyny that our society has and refuses to acknowledge.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's why I hate when people get mad at me for even like acknowledging like what is quote unquote men's issues, or just AMAB issues, because they're like, everybody's like, no, we live in a patriarchy, and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to point out, is that these men's issues are all a product of patriarchy, which has been victimizing women much more than it has been men, obviously, right? There's the desire to appeal to men and say, look, feminism and gender equality is something that exists to serve the entire population and the greater good of humanity, regardless of sex. And B, that the way we treat everybody is just reflected generally and it's evidence. The way we treat men is evidence of society's misogyny and sexism, which I think is the most important reason of acknowledging that. Because I think most men... I was just gonna say, I think most men are fine, if I'm being totally honest with you. I don't think gender is something that is ruining most men's lives, but it is certainly. But like male grievances that are on behalf of society's gendered expectations are certainly evidence of misogyny, and as well as a problem in their own right.
Yeah, I think that we all suffer because of the patriarchy and because of misogyny. And I think it's a lot of people are allergic to acknowledging that, just because there was that weird movement in 2015, the Meninist people who were like,
activists.
who were talking about men's rights as opposed to women's rights, like as a way of undermining feminist movements and feminist narratives. And that was dumb, and it really has undermined movements that would benefit men, social changes, because it just has these awful connotations with these awful people.
And also, calling yourselves men's rights activists is completely stupid, because it's not a matter of men's rights. It's a matter of women's rights, and how male grievances are a product of women's rights issues. With the few exceptions, one of them being divorce court. That's like the one like good talking point that men's rights activists had that like nobody was that just silenced all the libs, was that divorce court is always in favor of women, which is 100% true.
I think that there's more to be said about that, and the why that
The
is.
statistics are 100%
and
manipulated, but like in their
I
favor,
think
but there is 100% exists a bias towards women in divorce court.
I think I think that it's becoming less and less widespread. I will say that just in my personal experience, all of the women, including my own mother and my aunt, who got divorced, were absolutely fucked in the divorce.
Yeah.
Absolutely fucked.
And I don't wish
and-
to undermine that, just to be
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah.
And I also want to
Um,
put it out there. I 100% do believe that men, statistically, on average, are less fit to be parents and have custody of children than women are, just statistically. And we could take a whole fucking sociology course as onto why that is. It's not because men are inherently evil, that's for sure. But it is true that men, statistically, are less fit to be parents and have custody of children than women are. So that's a big reason why that statistic is there. But with that being said, I still do not believe. I think that influences the bias, but I do think the bias in favor of women in divorce court is there, and that's a hill that I will probably die on, unless I could see some hard evidence otherwise, which doesn't exist.
I think we should have a longer conversation about that, but it's kind of off topic.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we had less to say than we thought we did regarding trenders. I mean, we don't have to do super long episodes, but
I kind of anticipated that there wasn't going to be a lot to say.
I thought I was going to disagree with you a lot because of the way you presented it initially. I thought you were going to be, you were going to have like actual talking points as to like why trenders are hurting queer spaces and stuff like that. And I'm not surprised with like as far as like your character goes that you didn't do that. I'm just surprised because of the way you brought up the topic that you didn't have any hot takes. Like,
well, I
in
think
that realm.
if you want a hot take, I think that the biggest way that it negatively affects specifically the trans community is that I think it really negatively affects trans women. And you may not have personally experienced this.
Oh no, the trans femme appeal, it's my weakness.
But I have trans femme friends who experienced a lot of trans misogyny where, especially in school, there would be, well, this is kind of hyper specific. The stories that I've heard are kind of hyper specific about our school. For people who don't know about our school has a small population, and most of that population is queer. And that's been the case for a pretty long time.
It's a sanctuary for queer kids. It's for one reason or another, people decided that when you get bullied for being queer, you transfer to our school. And that's been a thing for probably decades at this point. I mean,
yeah.
It seems from when I've talked to people, it seems like that's just kind of always been an appeal that the school has. Sometimes more so than others. Like we saw the last year you spent here, we saw a lot of hetero activity going on.
Yeah.
More so than it was, but they're slowly getting back. They're slowly reverting back to the queer. It's just kind of in its nature to be a queer space.
Yeah. But about my friend was actually the one trans woman when there were literally 40 trans men.
Did you count them?
She did, apparently.
Oh, wow.
And she ended up, there was this cult of trans masks that came after her, and it was very, very trans misogynistic. And I think that some of those people were probably trenders, Demigloom. I think a fair chunk were probably trenders. And I think it does at this school, because queer people are the majority, it creates like a lot of people come out after going to this school. And maybe
including
that's just
myself.
because, yeah. and me. And part of that is because
it's the only accepting environment we've ever been in.
Yeah.
At least for me. I don't know about you.
Yeah. No, it was true for me too. But I think that it also creates this weird pressure to be LGBT. And I think that people probably end up kind of artificially, not always intentionally, faking being queer, but start kind of artificially thinking, well, all these people are queer, maybe I'm queer too. Which, by the way, no shame about that. If you experiment and then it turns out that you were wrong and you're not queer, that's totally cool. I wish that people didn't have to beat themselves up about that.
Well, here's the thing also, is I think that I'm one of those people who believes that being queer, believe it or not, is like this inherent like thing that you're born with, and you know what I mean? It's like you can try to unlock it somehow by experimenting. Like, I genuinely believe that being in certain environments, you know what I mean, would lead more people to try things out, whether that's with their gender identity or sexuality that they normally wouldn't. And I think if the entire population had I genuinely believe if the entire population was in a space where they were completely free to experiment with their gender identity and their sexuality, I think over 50% of our population would fall in the LGBTQ plus spectrum. And I think that's a really hot take, actually. I might get in trouble for that, but I genuinely do believe that like it's something that, with exposure and open-mindedness, is something that is like more likely to more develop in humanity. And I don't believe that there's a gay gene. Sorry, guys. Sorry, liberals. Sorry, millennials. There's no gay gene. It's places like the school that we went to. I do believe, I don't think create queers, but I think nurture people into queer behavior that they wouldn't otherwise exhibit.
And I don't necessarily disagree with you. I actually mostly agree with you. But I think that it's worth acknowledging that being, how do I say this? Being non-LGBT and going to a school where all of a sudden you are like one of 5 to 10 non-LGBT people, I think that is probably really hard, and that probably does create a kind of pressure to assimilate.
Yeah.
I mean, that
I'm not denying that.
We talked earlier about, you know, tribalism and wanting to be a part of a tribe, and it's really difficult when you're in a space where everyone is a certain thing and you aren't, and you want to be included. Yeah, it's ironic because that era of the school, there were a lot of people who would obsessively talk about trenders and how terrible trenders are and try and call out trenders. When I think one of the curious things is that you're more likely to obsessively talk about trenders if you are a trender. It's one of those silly things.
I don't think the majority of LGBTQ plus people are so obsessed with like the categorization like that. I think the majority of LGBTQ plus people are like, oh, yeah, I'm queer. Oh, you're queer. Cool. You know what I mean? Whatever.
Yeah.
Or you're queer and I don't like you. I guess you're a queer that I don't like. You know what I mean? Like, it's not questioning the queerness of people. I don't think questioning the queerness of people is something that queers often do, if I'm being completely honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And yeah, it's what my friend went through was really shitty. And some of the people that harassed her were actual trans people, but I think a lot of them really weren't.
Yeah.
Say that part quietly. I think a lot of them were, I mean, I think that our school has always had issues with performative activism, and really thinking
that's
that
the biggest problem in our school.
Yeah. Thinking that activism is so cool and wanting to be an activist, but then not putting any actual thought into it and just wanting the clout from it. And I think that one of the biggest ways that, at least in this performative kind of this performative activism culture, one of the biggest ways that you can give yourself credibility is by claiming to be a minority. Claiming to be bi, claiming or deciding to go by different pronouns for a while. It's just I think it's a thing. I think that those people, I think trenders eventually sort themselves out. I think that it's difficult to not be true to yourself.
And I think when you're not, I think trenders exist because they want to assimilate with a particular group of people, and so like their trender identity is sort of defined by the people around them. And once they fucking graduate from the queer only school and have to go out in the real world where they're going to be a minority, I think they're going to naturally just kind of like, kind of stop slowly but surely. Maybe not so subtly.
Part of why I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me,
I
though,
think
like
that is the biggest tangible issue. Something that I can identify that I've heard about that one of my friends has experienced that was really fucked up and harmful. Yeah.
What I think is more, I genuinely believe what is more prominent than people pretending to be trans is people who wish to identify as trans, like trans people who don't meet other people's trans criteria, exaggerating that, and that being like proof of trenders. I'm saying this because I've seen it personally. I've personally witnessed a lot of AFAB trans people, like trans masks or she, theys, or just like gender nonconforming AFAB people, definitely exaggerate or express that they've sort of kind of had to fake a certain amount of gender dysphoria in order to properly assimilate among trans folks, because that's oftentimes a prerequisite or just an expectation of trans people to experience gender dysphoria. And I think a lot of people don't experience gender dysphoria, but are also like completely validly trans, kind of are incentivized to exaggerate those things, or
Yeah. And I am one of those people where I think that I mentioned this before, but I do think that people will claim to be bi because it's one of those things that is unverifiable.
Yeah.
And it's something super easy where, oh, now I'm in on that tribe, and now I have this victimization card, and now I'm special and I'm different. And I think that that's annoying, but not always harmful. I think the biggest way that I think I've seen it be harmful is people who are complete fucking morons who, I talked to you about this a while ago, but every once in a while I see someone who will claim to be bi to give their argument credibility, and then they will just say the most out-of-pocket shit that is obviously undermining us as an LGBT movement. And it's occurred to me, like, there is no way that this person would be saying this stuff from a bi perspective. That just doesn't make sense.
Well, being bi or pan is like such a wide spectrum that I don't even...
Yeah.
Like, you could define bisexual in a way that describes the entire population. So it's very difficult to say somebody is like fake bi. I think oftentimes there are people who and I'm not one of those people who thinks that like bisexuals and heterosexual relationships or bi people who are more inclined to be with the opposite sex are any less valid members of the LGBTQ plus community. But I think there are a lot of people who are bisexual and but also aren't people who are bisexual that don't experience a lot of discrimination or like issues, nor is sexuality like a very influential part of their lives. That here's what I'm saying. I think there exists people who are bisexual, but people who also aren't subjected to the influence of their sexuality within their own lives. And I think that's probably more likely the case than people pretending to be bisexual.
Yeah, I think that there's truth to that. I also should make it clear that I think that there are a lot of bi people, and I think it isn't as uncommon as a lot of people think. I just think that also there's some people that are claiming.
Okay, well, if we want to get into real hot takes, I think everybody ever has had gay thoughts. I think all straight people have had gay thoughts, and you could interpret that as either as being bisexual or having gay thoughts. It just all depends. I think the definition of bisexual is so fucking loose that there's almost little to no social utility in like trying to create a definition of bisexual that isn't just anyone who identifies as bisexual. I literally think like the honor system is the best system we have regarding that.
I absolutely agree.
I think
to reiterate, I
people,
don't actually really care.
I think there are people who, I think there could be two people, right, who like on paper have experienced the same amount of sexual or romantic attraction to the same sex, but one of them identifies as bisexual and the other identifies as straight, right? I think there are people who are like, yeah, I'm a guy and I watch gay porn, but I would never want to be with a man, so that doesn't make me bisexual. And I think there are people who say, you know what, I find gay sex to be disgusting, but I think some boys are cute and I am bisexual. Like, it's just like, I think people are free to just like adopt that sort of identity at their own will and use it to describe themselves in whatever way see fit. I'm somebody who I mean I personally identify as pansexual, but I don't see myself dating a man anytime soon. So I would probably be considered straight by the majority of our population. Well, not the majority of our population, by a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think one more thing that I think is the proof of trenders that that you were thinking that I had is I've seen on a few occasions people who were out as bisexual and then transition usually as trans masks and then come out as gay. And I think that and to be clear, I don't hate these people, nor am I particularly bothered by them. I think that saying I'm bisexual was a way of putting a label on this queerness that they felt in their core, but they didn't know that they were trans yet. But when they realize, oh, I'm just trans, and then feel comfortable
saying, and then feel so like they would performatively express attraction to females, but now that because the label bisexual carries a certain weight that gives gravity to their arguments. But then once they identify as trans, they can say that they're gay and admit that they weren't attracted to females because the same social leverage is there because they're trans and technically gay now. So like,
I mean, we don't.
Is that
really,
what you're?
Yeah, we don't really. They don't really admit it or talk about it, and I don't.
And we're saying hypothetically, if this person were a trender, that would be the course of action, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've met people that went through this process. I think it's actually relatively common. But again, don't really give a shit. It's not a problem. They are queer. I just don't care about it.
They improperly labeled themselves in something arbitrary. Transsexuality is so complicated though too, to the point where you should never look for consistency in a trans person's description of their sexuality, if I'm being totally rude with you. I just described me being attracted to men as gay, even though I identify as a woman, right? Like it's so I don't even know how the hell to go about addressing like trans people's sexualities, because everybody like uses different words to describe different things. Like there's plenty of trans women who say that it would like if they're attracted to men, they'll say that's gay. And there's plenty of trans women who say if they're attracted to women, that's gay. It's different. For me, it's because it's not socially acceptable for me to call myself a lesbian or refer to the attraction to females as gay. I conform to social standards that oppress me. I'm an Uncle Tom, and I apologize for the oppression of my own people by calling attraction to men gay. But don't look for consistency in a trans person's description of their sexuality. unless you are like sitting down with them and having a long conversation.
Yeah. Well, that's
Is
about
that
all
it?
I have to say.
You want to talk about bi/pan lesbians and whether or not they're
Um,
disgusting abominations?
once again, I don't give a shit. Call yourself what you want. Be
Yeah,
happy.
there are people who literally say that it's the fault of bi/pan lesbians that lesbians get raped by men.
That's so
Like that's an actual
stupid.
talking point. Like
That is the
it's
most. What?
people are blaming
What?
people blame bi/pan lesbians for the invalidation of lesbianism on behalf of men. So I guess the talking point is that there are lesbians who are not attracted to men at all, right? And they use the word lesbian to say, "Hi, nope, I am a lesbian. I do not want to have sex with you. You are a man." And they use they think that cisgendered men would normally be like, "Oh, okay, you're a lesbian," but then they think that these cisgendered men are gonna like see somebody on Twitter call themselves a bi/pan lesbian, and then immediately be like, "Oh, well, you're lesbian doesn't mean you don't like men." Like, why
Except
can't?
no one is aware of this outside of these hyper specific conversations on fucking queer Twitter. No one. And all of
I
this,
don't think.
this would be a non-issue. It would be something that no one would be thinking about if men would just listen when someone isn't interested.
Yeah,
It's
I think
it's
like we
it's
don't.
their fault. Let's not infight about it. God damn.
I don't. I think it's absolutely ridiculous for like lesbians. This sounds like I'm attacking lesbians, but like for someone to say that like you are invalidating lesbians and that like sexual assault is your fault when you're literally describing a situation where men do something objectively terrible, right? And we're blaming it on lesbians on Twitter.
Yeah.
And it's identifying if saying the word lesbian no longer has the connotation that it once did, right? In which, by the way, I believe in the truth, okay, when it comes to categorizing people. I believe in truth and social utility. So I don't think that you can say like, oh, well, you can't just like make up like a byproduct of using a definition. And this sounds really bad. This sounds really wrong. What I'm trying to say is if the word no longer has that connotation, you just expressing disinterest should be enough for these men. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think any men are out there being like, oh, well, there's bi/pan lesbians, so your expression of disinterest means nothing to me, and I'm gonna rape you now. Like, I just don't believe that's a thing. It's not real.
It isn't real.
It's men's,
That's a made up problem.
Men raping women is men's fault and not women's fault for how they present themselves and identify. I never thought I'd have to be telling that to a bunch of queers on the internet, but here we are.
Yeah.
It's literally like that's literally like some like, well, did you see what she was wearing type of shit. You know what I mean? Like you're creating implications that green light men to do this to you. It's so stupid. It's so terrible. If you're a bi/pan lesbian, you are supported by middle school GSA.
Yeah. I want to know like the situation that they envision. Like a man is like, "What's your sexuality?" and someone says, "I'm a lesbian." And he goes, "Oh, well, bi/pan lesbians exist, so then it's okay to rape you." As if someone saying, "Oh no, I only like girls, I'm not attracted to men," would mean he goes, "Oh, well, guess I can't rape you now." That is so insane.
Yeah. And men and I guess they also argue that it like incentivizes men to like fetishize lesbians, which is like
what?
It's really stupid.
What?
So basically any argument that they have for bi/pan lesbians they're actually just biphobic.
Yeah.
Because all of these arguments could apply to bi people in general, but you're just using like a dog whistle. And by the way, all these people too have like fucking turf talking points and shit.
Yeah. Gold star lesbians and yeah. It's a problem. I think that kind of person does more harm than the average trender does.
And that's how I was going to conclude. That was going to be my final statement. Was I think that people who accuse people of being trenders have done significantly, and I mean like thousands times more social harm than actual trenders have. I believe trenders have done little to no social harm, unless we're talking about like the detransition grifters, which I believe are a completely different demographic.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't believe that they were seeking acceptance in the first place. I think they were literally seeking to lie about acceptance and
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like present that said acceptance as something evil. So I don't believe that
Yeah.
those are trenders even really, if
They
I'm being
are.
honest.
That's just mental illness.
I mean, you could probably argue, somebody's probably thinking this as I say this. You could probably argue that some trender out there, like their specific actions, have led to social harm, and I'm not going to deny that. But like, also, plenty of trans people's actions have led to social harm. Look at Blair White. I don't believe trenders as a demographic have caused much social harm, and I believe that almost anybody who has ever been accused of being a trender, like particularly on the internet, was not a trender and just somebody who didn't meet someone's arbitrary standard for transness. So I don't believe trenders are a social issue or anything to be concerned about. And quite frankly, I don't think most people even do anymore. I don't even think that, like, I think that this is kind of an outdated topic, if I'm being totally honest. And I think the only people that really believe in trenders are conservatives or transphobes, like people who aren't pro-trans use that idea to like weaponize trans people against progressive ideas. I don't know what else to say. Are we about ready to wrap things up?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Where can our listeners find you?
I made a YouTube channel. Woohoo! Applause!
Yay.
Applause! Applause!
I specifically told you to make one, and I didn't ask you to post anything. But are you gonna post anything on there? Do you have any plans?
Probably eventually. I don't have any specific plans right now. But we'll see.
Okay, cool.
And I also have a Twitter that I haven't really been checking. And I have a Tumblr if you want to see me shitpost about anime. Yeah.
Cool. You could find me. Where I really want you to find me, go listen to the Issue Crew podcast. Lately, it's been a fucking dumpster fire, and it's been really entertaining. A lot of yelling and screaming, and the raw hatred that the hosts of the Issue Crew all hold for each other is truly, truly a beautiful thing. And I wish more people would observe it for themselves. So go listen to the Issue Crew podcast. If you're looking for another podcast, do not stop listening to this to listen to the Issue Crew, though. This is better. This is way better.
Yeah.
Way better. This is a way better podcast. But if you got extra time, go listen to the Issue Crew podcast. And yeah, I mean, go subscribe to my YouTube channel, Demigloom. I'm making a video. I'm not going to share anything about this video. I'm making a video about communism. So
wow.
Yeah, I have some interesting opinions about communism that I'm going to share. It's going to be a great video. Better, more production value than my last ones, and I hope it turns out well. But in the meantime, go to my YouTube channel, watch my video about femboys, my video about abortion, and my video about trans people grooming kids. About how trans people aren't grooming kids. That sounded bad. I'm assuming you haven't watched any of my videos, right, Felonious Ferris?
Not really. I should though. It's just I don't always have the patience for video essays that aren't about Hayao Miyazaki or anime.
My video essays are like 3 minutes long.
I'll go watch your video essays.
Watch my femboy video. You don't have to watch anything else, or the abortion one. But like the trans the grooming video, I've said this publicly many times. I think my rhetoric was actually really bad and could be taken. It could be taken in the wrong way. So I don't disavow the point that I made in that video, but I think my messaging, I don't even think my messaging would be like interpreted badly in good faith. I think my messaging could have just easily been taken out of context to spread bad ideas. But yeah, go subscribe to my main channel, people. It's gonna be a thing. I've been on a vacation, making stupid Breaking Bad memes, but once I get I think I'm saying this for the first time publicly, actually. Once I get my $100 check from YouTube, because YouTube is stupid, you have to make $100 before they let you keep any of your money. Once I make $100, I'm fucking done with that shit. I'm done with those stupid memes. Moving back to my main channel, and we're gonna go back to leftist queer stuff. So yeah, Demigloom is back.
Wow.
Yeah. Thank you for listening. Oh yeah, voicemail line. Let me pull that up real quick. Our
Wait.
voicemail line.
Yes.
What? Leave voicemails at 608-218-4398 and we'll read them on the show. Also subscribe to this YouTube channel. Nobody's subscribing. Subscribe. Like and subscribe.
Notification bell. Woo!
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
We've this has been long enough. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Ugh.
What?